Planning Commission meeting of October the 3rd. Roll call, please.
Katie Sadrowski. Here. Lucy Nolan Hilbert. Present. Rob Cannell.
Present.
Genevieve is absent. Craig Sims.
Here.
Chris Dilbert.
Here.
And Rachel Witzik is here.
Public hearing none. Approval of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comments on any agenda items. Public's kind of... That's it? Okay. Seeing no public to speak, we will move on. Approval of the minutes of the meeting of September the 5th, 2023.
Approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0. Communications and correspondence workshop, there is none. Matters for consideration under new business, there is none. Matters for consideration, old business. Redwood Living, preliminary site plan review, Russell Street and Health Street, Laney Street, parcel 06-103-30, tossing my numbers, I apologize. 035, multifamily development discussion and action. So Matt, do you want to start with,
Sure. Thank you, Rob. So we had some comments last month for the applicant. It was preliminary as requested, and they did respond on September 14th with some itemized comments. For the most part, they're addressing the major concerns. We still have a few that are not addressed, such as the sidewalk on Roselle Road. And so we follow up with our official review letter on September 29th. I believe the commission has a copy. So not going through every comment, but we do have a couple that kind of need address or understanding from the applicant. And I know Jeff had the same concern about the Roselle frontage, whether or not there are wetlands on site. I know we know we have a creek in there, and that's open waters. We don't consider those wetlands. Those just open waters. I mean, you can extend that culvert, and that area will be pushed onto the property. You can still develop that. And as far as regulated wetlands, I mean, unless there's a study done by a wetland consultant that we need to review, this is just an open water area that could be crossed. So we're still under the recommendation that sidewalk need to be extended along Roselle Road. The paving, the residential is 7-inch concrete standard. They are working with their geotechnical engineer for probably a lesser section, so we need to see that report, but that could be done during the engineering review. So it will be concrete pavement, but the thickness may be different a little bit. The sidewalk recommendation connecting to Main Street, we still strongly recommend that. It's not required by our ordinance, but we still recommend that to be connected to Main Street along Health. It's outside the property boundary, but again, it's our recommendation. The rest are just normal comments that we can address at the during the engineering stage. And they did leave a section on the main drag coming in on the south side. There's only one sidewalk on the north side, on the main drag. So that's the only area that they left out. And I think it's just because of close proximity to the adjacent neighbor. We don't have all the details, but that would be still a recommendation if it's possible to build it on the south side.
Oh, okay, I see it. Or at least pull it along farther east so that there's a crosswalk, not in a parking spot.
Correct.
So there's a safe, it's a safe crossing. It doesn't really show it on here, but are these, it's a regular curve like in our subdivisions, right? Okay. So would these require, so people that are blind would hit a, I don't know what they call that, surface in front of the sidewalk when it ends before the street?
Oh, yeah, the warning plates?
Yeah.
Yes,
So these corners would all have that type of,
they should, yeah. Once they get to Main Street, they should have the warning plates. It's under the standard. The other comment, I was looking at their itemized response. The pond, they are proposing a 1-on-6 slope. There is a requirement to fence it if it's less than 1-on-6 or holds more than 3 feet of water. Anything 3 feet and above, the pond needs to be fenced. Now, we don't have the design detail, but they're saying it is 3 feet of depth, not water related, but just the depth related. So if the high water, the permanent water level is 3 feet, then we need a fence on the pond, for the pond.
but it's not showing the fence on the plan.
They don't. The sidewalk proposed is 4 foot wide, not 5. The standard is 5 feet for the village. So that's,
Is that the interior
yes,
sidewalks?
all the interior sidewalks are 4 feet wide, not 5. The engineer said it's called for 5 feet wide. So they deviated from that. They did widen the road for the standard width. It's 28 feet wide back to back.
I'm sorry, do they need to be 5 feet if it's not public sidewalks?
It's not whether public or not, it's accessed by the public. So whether it's public right of way or not, it doesn't matter. It has to comply with ADA standards. And the standard width is 5 feet, not 4.
Is there anything else from that?
Going through it really quick here. So they are not dedicated, they're not dedicated to public right of way. So we said 50 foot, 60 foot, and they said 50 foot for the entrance, and it's not a public right of way. So they will own the road, but we will have easements for the public utilities, not the road.
Say that again, please.
We will have a public easement for the public utilities, water, sewer, storm, Storm would be under a maintenance agreement, but water and sewer, yes. The road will not be in a public right of way. That's what they're proposing. So the maintenance agreement will have to extend to the public right of way. I mean, normally, it's just the storm sewer because it connects to the village system. It's just basically said if they fail to maintain the storm, then the village has the right to come in and charge them back. I would suggest you do the same thing for the road.
We don't want to take ownership of the roads.
No, if that's what the village wants, that no ownership of these roads, private, you should have a mechanism if they fail to maintain them. Then you have a mechanism to come in and do it and then charge them back.
Well, we got to make sure that, from a legal standpoint, that we're not stuck with maintaining, unless, like you said, there's a mechanism in place that we can recoup our funds.
So there's all sorts of conditions that you can put on them.
Do we have these in place for, say, Pine Woods, Cherry Acres,
I don't see that
Ringwood?
as enforceable at all, considering what some of these properties look like
No, you typically don't allow private roads. In this instance,
Why not?
it's because you don't want to deal with this. You don't want to deal with private roads
Why not?
here. No, because
for maintenance. So I'll give you a scenario. A fire truck comes in and there's a section that is not accessible, but so they can't get to the scene. Somebody get hurt. Whose fault is that?
I don't know.
James Curtin is a public street though, right?
Yes.
James Curtin is,
The Pine Woods,
but the other, but the off streets, the streets that go in front of the units are not.
oh,
Just that James Curtin is. And, you know, in my opinion, and this has nothing to do with the current project, but it's the history, you know, we should have never taken on James Curtin.
but those sewer lines go over James Curtin, right? They don't go on the little streets, it goes to the building, right? I mean, I can't imagine to put them all the way across each of the fronts.
But I guess what I'm saying is that historically, those type of developments, including the manufactured parks, are all private roads. We have no responsibility.
If you're referring, Chris, to like the mobile home parks,
Yes,
well, those are regulated by the state.
I understand that.
This one is not regulated by the state.
It's not, but whereas we have Pinewood, Perry Acres, and Bramblewood, you know, those are, you know, we don't have the right to go in there and do anything on those streets either.
Correct. Bramblewood, it's more of a parking lot setup.
I understand that.
Again, it's up to the village.
Pinewood would probably be the best example because there's multiple streets,
Yeah.
and we have no responsibility for Pinewood.
Well, I don't think you're talking per se responsibility, you're talking about if needed. Is that,
Maintenance, yeah.
it's not that we would go in there and do it if it doesn't get done and it's gotta get done, we would interject, right?
For like a hazard safety.
Yeah.
And then is there language like that at any other municipalities? Like you said, there's mechanisms in place that could be enforceable, but is there something in Rochester or something with another municipality where they're built where that could be done?
Yeah, it's a simple statement you put on the plans as part of their approval. You know, all streets are developer responsibility for maintenance. And you would have something addition to that with, like, in the opinion of the village inspection, or if the fire department seems finds a spot, it's not maintained properly, they have to address it. I'm not suggesting that you take over, but I'm saying that you should have a mechanism to protect you from, any accidents or unaccessible areas that, because of failure of maintenance, that you cannot serve a certain spot.
Have we talked to legal?
So, yeah, that needs to be clarified. And they may, part of their approval, you would have a strict language about maintenance. You can ask for a maintenance schedule, like a 6-inch or an 8-inch concrete, could live for 15 years. So you may ask for a 5-year inspection, and then subsequent year, if it goes beyond without any replacement, you could put that as part of your approval. Just have something. They did supply a traffic study. We recommended they look at the Health and Main Street, the left turn. They did supply a traffic study saying that it's not warranted for a left turn, any improvement for a left turn.
Did the county sheriff look at that as well?
I don't think so.
We're assuming that everyone leaving is going to go help the main. When I would expect that as time went on, the residents who are leaving out in the morning are going to realize that they can go down to Will and get out. They can go down to Pasco and get out. That everyone is not going to leave out on help. They're going to find what intersection is the easiest to navigate.
Heck, you can even drive down Roselle real nice these days, too.
Or you can go out the back way. If the back way is accessible, you go out the back way to Carl Street or, depending on where you're going.
Never seen it.
You go Roselle 26 if you're going that way to work or wherever.
But is the concern's coming in though, right?
Yes.
Off of Main?
Left turn from Main to Health, especially on the rush hours. But they had a professional study done, and they submitted that.
So it's not recommended that our sheriff looks at it then?
I don't think the sheriff is reviewing these.
Well, no, but I'm asking, should we have them review them? Because they're the ones that do, manage our traffic.
They typically don't.
No?
I think if it was any law enforcement agency, it would probably be state police. The gentleman that we had that gave us our new speed limit signs.
Yeah.
Right. And again, the Roselle Road will be under the county jurisdiction, so the county will have some say about the driveway, any paving required, any improvement to Roselle Road. That's the county jurisdiction, not the village. So that yet to come, and we still at the site plan stage. I don't think they submitted to the Macomb County Road Commission, not yet. That's all we have, basically, unless there are some questions.
Is there any other questions from the table for Smed?
No.
Would you like to respond to Smed's comments?
Sure. Thank you.
I figure we'll do it per person so that,
Okay. I'm gonna bring Ian up here next to me since he can speak to a lot of this. Thank you. Do I need to do my name?
oh, yes, please, but, I forgot one thing, because I know this was addressed to Jeff for the wetlands. Maybe you should attack that right off the bat?
Yeah,
Because that's a little bit, at least
this came to my attention first today, as your normal planners know, not here with you tonight, this is at the planning conference. Recognizing that there was some concerns about wetlands and potential open water on the property near Roselle. A little bit of research I did, just went to the state site to take a look at their wetlands map and what they're throwing out. From Eagle, there do not appear in their records online to show any wetlands that are along Roselle, either state inventory or national wetlands inventory. I've got a couple sample maps I can pass out to you that will show the site. Pass those down. Four sheets. And the wetlands that they are showing, they're saying they're classifying them as wetlands because they potentially are hydrosoils. So, I'm not a wetlands expert, obviously, and there are people who do that professionally for a living, who will come in and take a look at that. If that is a concern or an issue, that's what I would recommend, at least in terms of getting the site plan approved, potentially doing this conditional approval tonight. If there's any concerns that those wetland areas need to be researched further. And the condition being, would be a wetland study done for that area or for the entire site. But as you can see, there are areas of the site that the state, at least in their records, shows maybe potential wetlands. And again, they have to be looked at by a wetlands consultant. So that would be my recommendations. I know there seems to be a holdup on the sidewalk. We recognize we want to have one in there. There's the ordinance to all new development should have sidewalks with eventual connectivity for the entire community. And again, just looking at the map here, I don't know if that's going to potentially be an issue.
I couldn't find it. I mean, I walked the property.
Is that an actual creek?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm just wondering, is it an actual wetland, or is it land that's just wet because it's 2 feet lower than everything else around it?
But
It's the creek.
There's no beginning or end to the creek. The creek begins and ends within the property boundary.
Do you mind if I interrupt? We did have a wetlands evaluation done.
Oh, you did?
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your conversation. I guess first, Emily Engelhardt, Redwood, apartment neighborhoods, 3100 Telegraph Road, Suite 366, Bingham Farms, Michigan 48025. With me is Dean Graham.
From Colliers, 7050 West Saginaw Highway, Lansing, Michigan, 4997.
Great. I guess since we were just talking about wetlands, we can start there. We always have a professional wetland evaluation done. We hired Barr Engineering, who's formerly King and McGregor. They were acquired by Barr a couple of years back. And they did do a wetland walk and assessment because we have to know if there are regulated wetlands on the site, if it's going to impact our ability to construct a neighborhood. So they did consider at this point the Fish Creek to be a regulated wetland, which is why we showed it on our plan. While we love wetlands, we don't love them on our site, so we wish it wasn't, but that is what our wetland consultant had determined.
Yeah, so due to this being waters of the state, so Fish Creek carries drainage further northwest of the site. So King McGregor did a formal delineation and set flags out along the Fish Creek. And they identified that area in blue on the sidewalk exhibit we included, that is a regulated wetland area. So,
In their assessment.
yeah.
If Eagle doesn't have record of it, who's regulated by who?
It would be regulated by Eagle. So
They don't have record of it being a wetland.
correct, because there's never been a study done on the site. So we're the first persons to do a study. And this is typical of how we operate. We come into a site, do a delineation. We can either do a WIP, which is a wetland identification program with Eagle, and then they will add this area into the maps that you guys are looking at. But for now, those are just reference maps. They're not anything official until you get formal delineation or have Eagle walk the site. So what would happen is if we were to put the sidewalk in, we would submit the wetland delineation. We would have to apply for a permit from Eagle to permanently impact those wetlands, which they have the authority to tell us no. Then it's most likely that they would add this area to these maps in their inventory.
Yeah, I think those maps are created kind of on their best guess until somebody goes through and kind of takes it a step further. Just in addition to, since we're talking about the area of Roselle, the wetlands are our primary concern because they, are in our consultant view, possible regulated wetlands, which Eagle does not like anyone to impact, but, and in addition, there are some constraints with Roselle Road. I think there was an exhibit included with your package that just showed power lines, the road's not built on a center line. There's a number of constraints that make it very difficult to install a sidewalk in that area. In addition, I think at an early meeting about this project, there was some discussion that I believe the village did like a sidewalk assessment study a couple years back, and this area was not included because north, there are some, and again, this is just my recollection, so, but there are some areas where, actual buildings are sitting on easement area, so it's physically impossible for the sidewalk to be built north of this site. So, our goal is to, not impact regulated wetlands to build a sidewalk that potentially has some physical impossibility of ever being connected. So that's why we wanted to bring it to your consideration. We understand, why the village has this desire and it's part of the ordinance, but we just wanted to at least raise that and ask for your consideration.
I can clarify this sidewalk. That was north of Clark, not Carl. The next street north is Carl, and we can put the sidewalk from Redwood to Carl. It's not going to be a gap. But north of that, the next segment, there's a house sitting right at the right of way. So if we put a sidewalk, somebody will be looking at somebody's bedroom. So that's the area north of Clark, actually. The house close to the right of way is north of Clark, at the corner. So actually, technically, yeah, you can extend the sidewalk from Redwood to Clark. No problem.
From Redwood to where?
To Clark.
To Clark? To Carl? Carl?
Clark. The one we couldn't do, it was north of Clark.
I'm lost.
There
So
was
go
a,
from Main Street to Clark.
to Main Street to Clark. That's the one we couldn't do, because that one house. But south of that, from Clark to Redwood, there is enough room to build a sidewalk.
Why are we even considering going to Clark when the next street is Carl?
Yeah, I'm saying it's clear to Clark and Carl.
But
Carl
they
and
just-
then Clark.
They thought that,
Well, they're not responsible.
She was
I was
she was
misinformed or
misremembering
misheard.
what-
See,
Okay,
Carl
so
Clark.
from Redwood to Carl,
It's
it's
good.
your responsibility.
Yes.
Just
Well, not responsible, but she's saying it's not possible to build it. It
It's
is.
possible.
It is possible.
So, to Carl, yes, I guess I was referencing that there was an area of Roselle Road that was impossible to construct a sidewalk, and I just had misinformed or misheard about the area. We still have the constraints of the wetlands and the off-center road and the other items. I thought I would mention that, thinking it would be helpful, and it was more confusing, so I apologize. So, I don't know if you'd like to go kind of point by point or have further discussion on that point, but I can keep going down the list of items.
While we address all your items back to Surratt, and then we'll
Oh,
go back to Jeff.
great. I don't know that we received a copy of the review letter. I know it came in late, and but we'd love to get a copy if possible. We talked about the wetland study. The section of internal sidewalk that goes kind of on the south side of just our entrance drive, the only section that does not have the sidewalks on two sides of the road. We eliminated that for a number of reasons. Number one, the close proximity to that home right there. And honestly, the usability, you know, who's gonna choose to walk on that side? There's no apartment homes near that section. So, you know, in trying to create a slightly bigger buffer, as well as to line up our entrance, which was directed to us as much as we could with Delaney Street. You know, adding an additional sidewalk, you know, gets us that much closer to that home, as well as, you know, kind of potentially pushes us. And also, speaking on the church's behalf, their goal is to have us have that entrance drive as far southwest as possible so they can preserve parking for the parishioners. I don't know if that speaks to the reason why we eliminated that sidewalk, and we're hoping for some consideration on that small section. While we're on the sidewalk piece, I did review in the village zoning ordinance, the internal sidewalk minimum width does say 4-foot concrete on site. And then in the engineering standards, it says that in a multiple family projects with private street systems, the walk may be located adjacent to the street pavement and the width shall be determined so the walk will have a usable width of 3 feet. So I'm not trying to contradict, but that's how we designed the plan based on what we found in the zoning ordinance and engineering standards. So, while we like to have 5-foot sidewalks, it doesn't fit. We would be losing some buildings and things like that once we start making that street section larger and larger.
Can I stop you right there?
Let me clarify that. The zoning ordinance 515-96 sidewalks, it says public right-of-way, 5 feet concrete, 1 inch inside right-of-way. Internal on site, it may be approved with 4 feet. So they're interpreting this as an internal sidewalk, not a public sidewalk. And then it goes further, it says all sidewalks shall be barrier-free and designed in compliance with ADA standards.
So these sidewalks be considered internal or public?
You're internal.
Internal would be like a parking lot. To me, this is a public sidewalk, whether it's within a public right-of-way or not. It's accessed by public next to a road. So my interpretation of this setup, it's public sidewalk. Whether it's within a right-of-way or not, it doesn't matter.
But it's on private
It's
property.
on private property.
And it's not.
It is.
Private property, that means it's accessed by one owner. This is
That's what this is.
300,
This is one owner.
One property.
but this is almost 108 tenants living and using that.
Renters.
It's accessed by the public. It's not that one owner going to his house.
One owner.
One owner.
One owner of the property, but you have 108 homes.
But
They're
it's one owner.
responsible for clearing the sidewalk. They're responsible for replacing the sidewalk. maintaining the
Very
sidewalk.
true, very true.
Not public.
Very
Not our taxes, whatever revenue they get, is supposed to fix that stuff. That's not public.
You know, the entire animal
But it's on the public right of way.
But that's what he's saying, that the
But
street-
these aren't. These are all on
But they're accessed.
completely in private property.
Okay, if that's what the village is heading to, then the only way that we can recommend that is their professional engineer send a letter to the village that saying that 4 foot is in compliance with ADA standards. This way, if the village gets sued for approving these sidewalks, we're off the hook.
You talk about a suit, and I've always gone on the premise of what can you defend successfully? And in my opinion, since you brought up the word suit, that if this development was to challenge that ordinance in court, could we defend it? And I think a judge would interpret their private sidewalks of being 4 feet. Once you leave that development, then our 5 foot comes into play. And I don't think we could successfully defend that.
I understand that, Chris, but they still have to comply with local and state and ADA law.
But unfortunately, our ordinance does not reflect what you're saying.
It's an old ordinance.
Well, but we can only go by what's in writing right now.
We can't hold them to an a language of an ordinance that doesn't exist. They have to go by what it is right now.
But it does say right away, if it's in public right away,
But it's not
that's
in
zoning.
Right away.
Hang
It's
on.
not on a public street.
Yeah, that's zoning. The engineering standards request on the checklist, and it's published on our website, it says 5 foot minimum sidewalk. Always.
But are engineering standards considered an ordinance?
Yes,
They've been formally adopted
yes, by reference, yes.
by reference.
Yeah, we update them all the time.
You update them, but have they been formally adopted?
If you, I don't think this is the right setup for this discussion, but,
It's not, but
yeah,
I would agree with that.
yeah.
But by the same token, I don't want to sit here and hold these people to a standard that we can't defend. I mean, if internally 4 foot, I mean, 4 foot is 4 foot, okay? Once we get outside that project, and if they want to connect to Main along Hill, and that's outside the project, and that's a 5 foot sidewalk, ADA compliant.
So maybe this is an issue that should be reserved to refer to the attorney versus continuing to.
We're gonna hold our same position, 5 foot sidewalk minimum, regardless of whether it's a private or public. It's gotta follow the current standard. The current standard says 5 feet wide. If the village wishes to approve 4 foot because of old ordinance, or it's a private, or whatever it is, that's up to the village. We're not gonna recommend that.
But it would need language to protect the village.
You have the authority to approve a foot of sidewalk.
If the ordinance
I'm just trying to protect you.
If the ordinance says 4 foot, then we are protected.
The ordinance is not following current standards. It's a very old ordinance.
If the ordinance
Whose current
says 4 foot,
standards? Your engineering firm or
ADA.
ADA
ADA
standards.
says sidewalks have to be 5 feet wide.
We
Public
put-
sidewalks have to be 5 feet wide.
Yeah, in the past 5 years, we put 5 foot sidewalks all over
but
the.
that's all been out here in the public. I mean, that's all been out here,
Correct. Why did we follow that?
because that's all out here along streets that are existing, that are public streets.
How is that different from internal street?
I still say it's private.
It's private property.
Can
It's
I-
still accessible by wheelchair. I've never seen a 5 foot wide wheelchair before, and I've been working in healthcare for 20 years.
No, the wheelchair is, the minimum is 3 feet.
Yeah.
But you do the 5 foot for somebody to bypass the wheelchair. Otherwise, you'd be standing there waiting for the wheelchair to go across a segment of the sidewalk.
Well, they can make those things.
That's why. So what you're doing here, if you're putting up 4 foot, you're basically telling somebody who's walking, coming to a wheelchair that to go on somebody's driveway to let the wheelchair go, or go on the road to let the wheelchair go. You have to have enough room to bypass the wheelchair.
I don't recall.
That's where the 5 foot comes in from.
I don't recall. Were you guys okay with the sidewalk only being on one side a month ago?
No.
No, I mean, not us. I was wondering if engineering was okay with a 5 foot sidewalk on one side.
No, we're
A month
not.
ago.
Since day one, we said 5 foot in most of it.
Can we, interject? Is that possible?
Does anybody else have a question on the table that would like to hear first? Yes, go ahead.
So we design all Redwood sites to be ADA, FHA compliant. Their typical road section is a 22-foot road with a 4-foot sidewalk. ADA only requires a 3-foot width. So you build 4 foot to get, use some wiggle room with the contractor to shorten it, and you're under 3 feet. Then you would not be ADA compliant. So the Redwood standard, Chesterfield Township, Rochester Hills, I think Chesterfield is the same road section we're showing now, which is 4 foot, 28, 4 foot.
And I just like to note, unless I'm looking at a different section of the engineering standards, I just had pulled up 2235-13, which speaks to sidewalk C, does say, and I had read that previously, for mobile home parks and multiple family projects with private street systems, the walk may be located adjacent to the street pavement, and the width shall be determined so the walk shall have a usable width of 3 feet. So that came from the engineering standard. So I'm not sure if there's a separate section that talks about 5 feet, but we had read we're a multiple family development, and we went to the further of 3 and 4, we went to 4. So,
All our communications said 5-foot sidewalks since day one. So this was communicated to the applicant from day one, pre-application meeting, day one. The standard details called for a 5-foot.
Well, what I'm seeing here is it says provided 3-foot minimum clearance with for continuous passage. If a sidewalk is less than 5 feet width, provide passing areas of 5 by 5 at intervals no farther than 200 feet apart.
Yeah, I know the code.
Okay. But you were saying that they have to be 5 feet wide.
Yeah, I just
And it's not what that says.
That just give you an example, that the 5-foot standard is for somebody to bypass a wheelchair. A wheelchair minimum is 3 feet, but only a wheelchair you're gonna use that 3 feet. So somebody walking to cross the wheelchair, they have to go somewhere. Are you sending them to the road or somebody else's driveway? Or what if there are 2 cars parked in the driveway, there's no space to bypass anybody? It's 5 feet wide, guys. I said enough. If you were gonna allow it, based on what you have, that's fine. You have the authority to allow it.
I don't know if I'm comfortable. I think it needs to be discussed a little bit more. I'm not comfortable or writing you. I understand what you guys are saying too. Maybe we need a legal,
What is Chesterfield doing?
4-foot sidewalk, 28-foot road, 4-foot sidewalk, which is what we're pretty much doing.
So that's considered ADA compliant.
Do they have an issue with that?
That's their typical section. That's Macomb County's, no,
That's Macomb. I guess Macomb County,
yes.
yes.
They follow their specs.
And what's in New Washington?
I think it's for, I don't know the exact.
I'm not sure, that one was developed some time ago, so I don't remember.
On the Washington Township development, do you notice this?
I didn't wrong measure. I did see your, not a wheelchair, but I did see countering, traffic going both ways. And I didn't see anybody like stepping out to the street to pass somebody, I don't think. Yeah, I was surprised. There was a lot of pedestrian participation out there, which is great. Jeff, do you have any suggestions?
Sidewalks now, I would say. Not my wheelhouse, I wouldn't override the engineering.
It sounds like it's something that's going to need further discussion, so I think we're not going to get on that one.
Kind of move along, other items?
I think the only other item that came up was the pond, and, we are going to design our pond to meet the engineering standards, so if we can keep the water level at an appropriate, we're not proposing a fence at this time. Again, with the site constraints, that fence would be right next to somebody's patio. Again, we want it to be safe and compliant, but if we're able to design it in a way that it is, we are not proposing a fence. We don't always do a fence around our ponds or anything like that, so this is typical for Redwood. I think that was, and I guess I'll just bring up items that didn't come up, but just that came up at the last meeting that were addressed in our itemized list. I know at the last meeting there was some discussion about the power lines. I just wanted to reiterate, those will not need to be moved. I know they're outside outside an easement, we'll work to put those in an easement, but we won't need to relocate the power lines along the neighbor's land there. I think you were worried about that being a significant issue for the neighbors in addition to some other encroachments. So the power lines are okay. And then finally, there was some discussion about the safety of the neighbor directly southwest of our entrance. And you'll just note on the plan there, we adjusted that curb from a rolled curb to a straight curb so that there's just a little bit of additional protection that if someone, wouldn't roll onto his property, so, his or her, excuse me.
So if it's slick, the curb's big enough to stop the car from
It's a standard 6-inch,
taking this picture.
At least wake you up.
Just to add a little bit on that section there, so. I think that covers it for the comments from engineering, and we can take a seat from planning. I'm not the direct meeting, but.
Any questions on the table?
Just not to beat the same dead horse, Macomb Township 5-foot minimum, Chesterfield 5-foot minimum, Lennox 5-foot minimum. And that's it.
But Chesterfield allowed 4 foot.
I don't know, their ordinance says 5. I'm looking at it right now.
I do have a question about the pond. So what your design thoughts and efforts are is to keep it within the range of the ordinance that is, but if it comes up to a point where it's not staying at that height and it's cresting further out, or is there a contingency that we can, if it doesn't maintain what, personally, I think it looked prettier. I seen the one in Macomb, but if it's safety, is there a contingency if this pond is deeper, or if it is not maintaining the proper height for safety, that you would put it in?
I would assume that we have comment from engineering that we would, if we, by the ordinance, needed a fence, we'll do a fence.
Yeah, so if they're holding more than 3 feet of water, then they need a fence, regardless of the slope.
But isn't the pond design, you don't make I guess the square area of it is what dictates the size. There's a formula to how much water is going to end up in here, right, from East Home.
Yeah, that, they have not submitted that yet. We're just telling them that's the standard. If they're deeper than 3 feet, holding more than 3 feet of water, and the side slopes are steeper than 1/6, then they need to fence it. If they can design it avoiding these 2 conditions, then there is no need for a fence.
But is holding water, is there a time period? Like, say, holding water for 72 hours?
Once it reaches the 3-foot level, that's it. Because I think the old reason for it, if I remember correctly, if a child walks in, they will not drown in 3-foot deep water.
I'm just curious, because I see the other ponds and the other developments say Pembroke has no fence, Amherst has no fence.
We didn't review those.
Unfortunately.
Thank you, Chris.
How much
Well,
water?
the guy that did review it's in person also.
How much water is typically in that? Is there a pond currently there?
No,
Okay.
there is an existing one on the west side, but we're not touching that one.
And we do design our ponds with bench, no matter what, for safety. We want our residents to be safe and people to be safe. So, if we do design them in a way that, even with 3 foot, to try to make them as safe as possible.
Any other questions? We can go to Jeff.
Okay. As far as the planner's report, I'm referencing a letter sent by your planner to you guys September 27th of September. All of the items that he noted on here in terms of his review, in terms of the district, the conventions, the parking, landscape, everything's either in compliance or exceeds the standards. signage, since that's administered again, the building department, the request within the sign plan will come in after the site plan will be approved, and that will be taken care of there, so that's not necessarily addressed there. And he does note the discussion from last month's meeting, that they had 2 sidewalks being installed throughout the site on both sides. Those are reflected in the plan. So that being said, no objections from planning as far as the site plan goes.
Jeff, based on your research on the wetlands portion of this property, if it's not recognized through the sources that you've gone through, I mean, obviously we have to fix this issue and figure it out, but if that isn't the case, does that allow you to spread this out a little bit further into this area, because this is not a factor for you, which takes care of your easements, your sidewalks, your, by pushing your whole development further out, if this is not found to be, because obviously, I can't, especially across the country, it's all walkable land, it's flat, some of it's actually higher than the road, but I don't know where all that ends up, if the real road went through there. But it just doesn't look like a hindrance. But if this property, would that allow them more flexibility? You know what I'm saying?
To create the 5-foot.
Yes, to create the 5-foot sidewalks, to create the easements that you're questioning. If you've got 300 feet, 400 feet of space still over here for you to utilize?
So we always take our wetland experts' opinion as the rule, and they told us it's regulated, and we always try to stay away from it, because it just means more permitting, mitigation, and they can tell you no. I mean, it's Eagle's rule.
It's their call.
It's
If they
their
design it.
jurisdiction.
But if it's not recognized by Eagle, what's the issue?
So Eagle doesn't have a foolproof inventory. Like any site you go to,
Sounds
have wetlands on it.
Eagle's
So, like every site we go to, we do wetlands report. And we take that as the rule. And if we end up impacting it, we submit that report to Eagle. They can either go out on site, look at it, or they just accept the report as is. And then we have to go through the process of permitting. And you do have to justify why you're impacting these wetlands. So it could
Because
be
street dead ends right there at the industrial property. It basically dead ends at the street. And then when you follow the aerials, either way, there's houses, there's, everything's sitting in the way of.
pole barn part of it too?
Yeah. There's all
So,
sorts of
I
stuff.
mean, you were gonna keep the pole barn, correct? So the pole barn's in the wetlands, so you're gonna keep that, or you're
Pole
gonna?
barn
No,
is not.
not.
But obviously, there needs to be some clarification.
We can submit.
Submit our wetland report that we received, but
Would you submit that to Eagle and see what they say, or how do you go?
You can go through a WIP, it's about a 6-month process, so, I mean, and I think that you're down to one person in the state doing it, so. But typically, we just take that as the rule, that's the boundary of the wetlands, and we stay out of it. Now, if there were, I don't want to speak for Redwood, but we've done enough work with them where they're the only, like this development, there's no sidewalks around, we will gladly design and install any sidewalk. It's these wetlands, it's the power pole, it's the water main, the road is 9 foot off the right of way, so, and we got 4 feet to work with. This is a very unique situation why we're not showing the sidewalk and asking for discussion.
right, we're not, a sidewalk is not usually a big deal for us to install a public sidewalk along our property frontage. It's just further complicated and, you know, I don't know if they're,
It's very hairy, very difficult.
So I just want to clarify, wetlands does not mean unbuildable. It just, you have to go through the permitting process. And it may be a very expensive build, but it's not a no-build zone.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just, as far as Eagle is concerned, that's not a wetland. So there shouldn't be any permitting if we,
So it's not,
as far as Eagle is concerned, it's not a wetland.
the
correct?
second we start to build or send plans, it is. Like, they could go out on site and say, oh, these are wetlands.
The,
Send plans to,
And like, if we have to submit for public water, public sewer,
okay. And how would you,
that's going to be.
Eagle regulates the water and sewer. And the maps that are provided by the state, the National Wetlands Inventory, and things like that are estimates. I mean, I don't know if that's an accurate, they're not, that's not Eagle's definitive, this is where there's wetlands. This is kind of a guide for people, and you have to go through these individual, they put it back on the property owner and the developers.
In addition, we have to submit a notice of purpose to Eagle, which allows you to send stormwater from a construction site. You have to say this is associated with any wetlands within 500 feet of a water body, which this is. So they'll find out about it regardless, and they'll ask, did you do a delineation? We give them our report.
I mean, it said it was Fish Creek, but, I mean, Fish Creek apparently got paved over with cement from the industrial development that's just south of
It
it.
goes through storm sewer to the pond and then south.
So is that what this in your drawing is?
Yeah, there's, and it carries water from northwest of the site as well.
Have you had a conversation with the Macomb County Drain Commissioner's office?
Not at this point.
Because they control Fish Creek.
Correct.
Or they're responsible for it.
And it's our assumption we'll have to give them some sort of public drainage easement over the Fish Creek.
And we don't want to find what, I mean, we would prefer if this was not wetland, we could just build a sidewalk, you know, expand our development, but, you know, based on our professional consultant's point of view, very likely Eagle would find this to be a regulated wetland based on current laws
That is-
today.
Sorry to interrupt, but that is the language in their report that these would be under the rules of Part 5.1 or whatever. These are regulated. It is FAR's opinion that these are regulated by Eagle based on the criteria that they're given.
Well, Eagle may not know that they exist, but once they find out that they do exist, they would
Correct.
consider them.
And there's been cases in, I think, Macomb County that just hit a developer pretty hard. They tried to claim it as farming, and it's not farming.
It was recently,
I mean, the village has had a lot of controversy over what wetlands are and what wetlands aren't, and, I mean, you go from Meadow Creek and the bulldozers to wherever, but is the opinion of Bergman, is that definitive, or is there, do we, as our engineer, do you go out and check this out?
No, we are not wetland engineers, so we would hire a wetland specialist to do this. But in our opinion, looking at this is an open water. It's a creek. Of course, it's gonna be wet, but it's a creek. You're only doing a creek crossing when you do work in that area. If I'm looking at this, we have a hydrant right there. Did we get a wetland permit when we built that hydrant? Chris, remember that?
a long time ago.
Long time ago. This is just a creek crossing. In my opinion, this is just an extension of a culvert to put the sidewalk on top.
So if there's something on the west side of this street, you could connect it with a pipe, as done with the industrial development to the south.
It's an open water creek. It's not a wetland. It's not a standing wetland. That's our opinion. We could be wrong. But the way I'm looking at it, this is an open water creek that you can cross.
What if,
With proper permits.
what if we we agreed that this is not wetland, and you started to build the sidewalk, and Eagle came in and said, oh, this is wetland, what happens?
Greg, we would probably get sued.
Some large fines, and I don't know if Eagle does this, but I've heard cases where, you're personally liable to go to jail.
Yeah.
You will get cited for working within a wetland without a permit. And they will have.
I would not stand for drawing as an engineer.
Let me
We have
suggest,
a professional wetland.
let me suggest this. This is a county road right away. If you submit to the county a preliminary, saying, I want to build the sidewalk, I want to extend the culvert. And ask them what they think if that area is a wetland or not. That's their jurisdiction. And they will not give you a permit if you don't obtain the wetland permit. This is not the village right away. So if they say it's a wetland and it's back again, a wetland, it's not a no build. It's just a restrictive permit. The cost is not a hardship.
How much? So they're gonna review the property, see what in the case of this property, all the frontage is very, flat. It's not floodable or, so the county's gonna look at all those items to gauge whether they feel it is buildable or not buildable, whether it's
That's their right.
wetland or not.
How much of a wetland would it, or supposed wetland would this disturb? Because it looks like it ends kind of right where the sidewalk might be going.
Well, it also goes over where the driveway's coming in. Doesn't it, or no?
Our driveway is not impacted.
Oh, I
It's
see your
real
driveway.
close, but it's right.
Okay, I can see
That's
that.
why we're talking the road up that way, it's not that. That's why there's all those buildings are.
Isn't there a provision that you could do something with that wetland if you replace it somewhere else?
There is mitigation, but you still have to justify to the bill why you're impacting these wetlands.
So the driveway.
From my point of view, it's safety and to make our community walkable,
ADA compliant?
community compliant. I mean, there's been a lot of effort over the years to connect everything here. Hence, we take
So
it
there's two
serious.
issues that still stand out there. This is one, and the 4 or 5 foot sidewalk is the other, which I think we will somehow get an answer on both of them.
So is that a motion to figure those items out before approval, or?
I think you need to do something with that ordinance for the interior side.
I mean, are we in line for a motion right now?
Well, my question is, do we table this, do we get all our facts before we send them one way or send them the other?
I mean, we can go contingent, these, first with the internal sidewalks, I think it would be a simple answer. And I think the wetland concern, I think when this conversation with the drain commissioner's office, and you seek the permits for whatever you have to do on that side of the project, I think the whole wetland thing will be answered. They'll either give the permit based on it not being a wetland, or won't give you permit because it is a wetland.
Yeah, but if Macomb County permits the sidewalk, are you then no longer liable then?
No, it's still on us.
Even if
the
Macomb
engineer
says you're good to put it there?
But I still need to get a permit.
Would it okay from Macomb County help in your justification to put it?
I have a delineation from a wetland expert.
That question right there doesn't prohibit you from starting construction and doing all the things. That's one of those things that just need to be answered eventually.
It would be, as part of the site plan approval, a sidewalk, and we have options, but it's up to the village of what you want to do, and I understand the desire for connectivity. And we're just trying to discuss the constraints of the site, wetlands, the, design of the road, the right of way not being more than 4 foot wide, and the electrical poles and things like that. It just makes it very difficult for us, but.
Jeff, can we go contingent upon, getting these 2 questions answered? For our site plan approval, should we, or how do we proceed? Because we certainly don't want to hold them up. I'm sure there's another step that they need to appear in to take. And these 2 questions, these 2 bills are at the end of the project anyway, or toward the end of the project. How do we proceed?
I'm personally of the nature that we should finish and get all our answers before we approve something. I'm not a big fan of contingency myself. And give you the option that, can we come back next month with these items resolved between engineering and legal and the county and all these people are, on one page, or at another meeting where and I don't think the commission would object to meeting sooner if these issues are resolved in 2 weeks. We offer that to developers as well, to meet sooner if everything got resolved and, you requested.
I don't think the wetland issue is going to be resolved. They say that because of their professional report, that they're going to stand by it, which I don't blame them for. I would too, that's what you think.
You know how fast that would
But is there somebody at the county level, Jeff, that also is that type of person that goes around and
No.
So it's hired out.
When we've had to, we've always brought wetlands consultants in when we had to look at these properties, something we're required to do for recreation purposes or whatnot. We always have experts in.
So the county would make a determination if they were looking at this.
If this was a county-owned piece of property, we would conduct a wetland study and we would follow accordingly. This would not be decided. I think the question here is, I think we're, from what the applicant is saying, we have a wetland. We have a wetland that's going to be recognized by people as a wetland. If it happens through the permitting process or happens, however it happens, it will come out. I think the question to the village is, how bad do you guys want the sidewalk? If you want the sidewalk, the question is then I would ask Sir Matt, what type of engineering would need to be done to determine, because that's outside of my domain, how would you determine what the engineering would have to be done to put a sidewalk in there if Eagle doesn't declare the wetland? We're talking about put a walk in, or,
Again,
I don't know what that cost would, what that would be.
is the commission willing to waive the sidewalk because there's a wetland, or the village is waiving the sidewalk because it's cost too much?
I don't see it, the wetland. I walked up on this street, I walked on this property.
You certainly have the authority to waive it. We don't see it. My recommendation stands, but if the commission agrees to these recommendations, or the hardship, if there is a hardship, you can certainly waive that sidewalk. It's not going to my house. But I can't waive any ordinance. You have the authority. I can only state, in my professional opinion, everything in my letter is warranted.
That's a big deal.
I can't see myself waiving the sidewalk and require 3 other projects to pretty recently.
So is there a motion to go forward, or is there a motion to table, or further discussion between the professionals to resolve these issues? How do you see? We pay Surmet over there to give his opinion and
Stick
But
with
I
that.
would like to overrule, I can't, it's kind of hard for me to overrule some ed.
With,
I'm an education.
I'm not the lawyer.
Well, you're far better than me, and I'm getting asked to
We
vote.
pressed the issue on the sidewalk for the wetland. For the Roselle. I'm just trying to think how we can. So we've jogged the road to avoid the wetland, and this is how much sidewalk, how many feet of sidewalk I'm
I don't think it actually lists it on here, what the width of that is, does it? Unless this is at 366 feet, would include the driveway maybe, is that what that is there?
367.
How many?
367. Property,
367?
property, property.
How much of that is the wetland?
Down Roselle? I mean, that the whole face of the property,
Yes.
and the whole frontage of the property.
Correct.
Craig's got it right there for you, Mr. Dillon, sure. But it's just that, I don't know.
But if we say, okay, let's not go the whole frontage of the property, but let's waive that portion and just go from Carl to the drive, then the wetland is not impacted, right? We're not encroaching on that wetland?
No.
If you're doing just north of the
Yeah.
Of the
drive,
driveway.
Well, I mean, this is the part that's in question as far as the wetland. And am I saying this right?
So you were saying put a sidewalk along Redwood's frontage, north of the wetlands.
North of the wetland, from the drive to Carl.
To Carl.
Outside of Redwood's frontage. I just want to make sure because we don't own that frontage,
That's public right of way.
right? But it's not our frontage.
So we'd have to extend it to Carl Street, but just from Carl to the drive, and that way we're not impacting,
Oh, I get what you're saying.
we're not encroaching on the wetland area,
I get what you're saying.
which makes it walkable. It does connect that project to Carl Street.
I think that's huge. Having the walkability, that's something that you stressed, and that's something I had to process, is bringing people downtown, and if we can maintain that along Roselle up to Carl, and if it's not impacting wetlands, potentially, you know, I mean, like,
I think that would be a decent compromise.
Is that gonna get addressed on Help Street too, so that this development reaches into Main Street along Help?
It's funny, health frontage is 200 feet and the frontage along, to get to Carl, it's 170, so 370.
Then I'm gonna offer,
Well, yeah, but
Exactly,
it's not on
same way.
wetlands if there's wetlands, but I
I'm
still
gonna offer
think
a compromise. I'm gonna offer a compromise that we install sidewalks on Roselle from Carl to your drive and on Help from your drive to Main.
So the only reluctancy I have is we don't control that frontage.
On,
we control it, because it's right.
Correct.
yes.
Now, Health Street is real close to the right of way, so that sidewalk would be right up against the edge of pavement, which we're already doing inside the site. It's a constructability thing. Because we got power poles, we got hydrants, so that could get outside of the public right of way, because it's only 50 foot in help.
Yeah.
That's the only reluctancy I have. I don't want to agree to something.
No,
right,
we would have to provide a right of way to you.
So that would keep people off of Help as far as walking safety wise.
And to connect their property on Roselle to Carl Street. And we would just avoid that wetland section of
Right, going south.
one south.
Okay.
And the benefit that they can walk around the block.
Sure.
I like this compromise. My only scary part is, Craig mentioned it several times, that we have not compromised on other sidewalks. And I don't know if that opens up
I
our
think this
door.
is a unique situation though. You know?
Well, that's what I'm asking for. Is there a justification that you get from the attorney to say, you know, we're making a compromise and this is why and how it's defendable if something happens?
If we were able to acquire those right of ways, would you be acceptable, would you be agreeable to?
I think as long as it's approvable and permittable
Yeah.
and constructible, we would be amenable to the cost and undertaking that.
I would rather deal with that than wetlands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we-
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Right. So I guess with the caveats of, you know, if we can approve it, permit it, and construct it, we will do it.
When we will come,
And,
And I can't find where you put that in here. Didn't you put that in your response?
no, we did not. I think one of the,
I thought one of them did. Didn't you?
well, that we referenced, I think, sections of, I don't know if it's the zoning ordinance or the engineering standards that do, in our interpretation, grant the planning commission the authority for a more imaginative approach to waive requirements for sidewalks. I believe that that is referenced in our
Yeah.
letter.
17. Yeah,
Number
I read that.
17.
So, I like the imagination. Hopefully it can be reality, but we
Yeah.
wanted to reference that.
And just so you know that if this is agreeable and doable, that sidewalk from your drive to Carl and the sidewalk around Bell shall be a 5-foot sidewalk.
Of course, public right of way.
so do we have, recommendation as to how we should proceed? Is this compromise a valid option for us to pursue without further
Contingency for that,
legal opinion?
contingency for the sidewalk on
Submitted.
Roselle, and then
Jeff?
on legal's opinion for the interior sidewalks. Right.
I'm always scared of doing something that is going to put us in a pickle with all the other stuff.
Oh, we don't like pickles. Like that solid.
I also don't want them to come out some more time.
I just want to move this project forward, and let's keep it moving. And I think the things that we're talking about right now, I think they're doable. We can get an opinion on the internal sidewalks, and if legal says that our ordinance is valid and protects us with 4 feet, then we should share that with the builders and keep it moving.
I agree, but shouldn't we do that, approve it after we get those opinions? Because if they come up with other things that maybe, to quote your imaginative resolve, if those imaginative resolves open up other doors, or, that's just my opinion. I think that it needs to be buttoned up on our end a little bit more between all the parties before we.
There are still a number of steps, and I think one of the steps that we still have to undertake, or still have to undertake, is the engineering review, and what else?
Fire, the water and sewer, all the
Did we get a
buildings.
fire report back?
Fire did approve.
Yeah, fire department.
Fire approved.
Yeah, well, we're looking at final
Yeah.
hydrant placement, valves and all that stuff.
So there's still other steps, so I would make a motion that, put in place our compromise on the sidewalks and seeking opinion on our internal sidewalk width, that we approve the site plan with those, what do you want to call them? Contingencies.
I will second.
I think I got all that.
Sorry about that.
So,
Rachel needs to
I'm
ensure.
trying to keep it short.
question, Chris, are you gonna wanna approve them administratively if those two issues are resolved? And then not have them come back to planning, or you want them to come back?
No, if they're approved administratively, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, if there's, if legal says that our ordinance is valid and pertains to the internal sidewalks of 4 feet, that can be done administratively.
So your motion is to approve with contingency?
Jeff, you okay?
So there's a motion and a second.
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Chris Gilbert,
Yes.
Craig Sims,
Yes.
Lucy Nolandover,
Yes.
Katie Sabrowski,
Yes.
Rob Canal,
No.
and Rachel Witsit.
Please note for the reasons, I don't agree with contingencies. Fix it before you.
Motion passed, 4-2.
Thank you all for your consideration and all your work thus far. We look forward to continuing our imagination and building. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. Planners report, any further items, Jeff?
Nothing job, didn't tell me to report on anything else, so.
Okay. Public comments on non-agenda items, any? Okay, hearing none. Call from the table. Nobody? Okay. A motion for adjournment at 8:23 would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. 6-0.